Thank you very much, Mr. President. Abortion is a very complex and emotional topic, always. There are women dealing with this complexity every single day, making a difficult choice on whether or not to expand their family. Additionally, it will always be jarring for women when a legislature, almost 70% male, considers legislation that has serious repercussions for women, their health, their lives, and their livelihoods. The fact is that access to contraception and abortion care means that a woman can take charge of her educational and career goals. The ability to put off having a child and decide when the time is right to have a family has a powerful impact on women's economic stability and mobility. This legislation, SB 456, is another example of the Republican Party trying to paint abortion care as unsafe for women. I definitely appreciate the focus on women's health, but everyone needs to understand that it is 14 times safer to have an abortion than it is to give birth. Medicated abortion is not a high-risk procedure. It's been proven safe and effective for decades. Limiting access to medicated abortions could lead to delays in accessing abortion in general and push a woman into a more invasive process. Bottom line, limiting access to doctors is another way of backhandedly restricting abortion care for women in Georgia. If we are genuinely interested and invested in protecting pregnant women, we would prioritize access to health care, contraception, Medicaid expansion, paid family and medical leave, affordable child care, and other policies that support maternal health and child rearing. But we have one of the highest rates of child poverty in the country. We rank worse than all but a small handful of other states. So our government, including those of us here in this chamber, are currently not doing a fantastic job of taking care of the children who are already here. Laws like SB 456 only contribute to issues such as childhood poverty and neglect. Forcing women to have children by limiting their access is unethical. To make things worse, maternal mortality is an issue that we're only starting to grapple with and put more emphasis on. We still lead the nation in our high maternal mortality rates. And the Maternal Mortality Review Committee found that 87% of pregnancy-related deaths in Georgia between 2015 and 2017 were preventable. Barriers to prenatal care significantly contribute to these preventable pregnancy-related deaths. There are serious concerns, therefore, surrounding this bill. It codifies junk science and misleading terms, encouraging doctors to tell women that a quote-unquote reversal of a medically induced abortion is dangerous. The bill works to unravel the strides we have made as a society to increase access to health care through technology. If a woman is already seeking abortion care via telehealth and mailed prescriptions, then there very well may be a barrier to access that technology can remedy. Restricting the access is not going to make her change her mind about wanting the pregnancy. It will only make her feel trapped, frustrated, and hopeless. Speaking of that, there are many logical reasons why a woman may prefer online consultation for abortion care. Some of these reasons include a lack of childcare, an inflexible work schedule, or a lack of access to a nearby provider if one lives in a rural area. In instances of abuse, it may be the only way for a woman to access this care. Removing the online consultation option turns access to this care into a privilege for those that have the resources and flexibility to visit a doctor in person, and places a particularly large burden on women in rural areas. Next, SB 456 bans providing abortion-inducing drugs at universities. There is simply no reasonable justification for banning abortion care at university clinics. College students are adults and shouldn't be forced to venture off campus to find basic health care. Combining this ban on abortion pills in university clinics with the removal of online consultations unreasonably burdens college women seeking to have their health care needs met. These are very real and significant issues. Legislative mandates based on unproven and unethical research are dangerous to women's health. In fact, they're the opposite of addressing, quote, women's health and safety, unquote. We have crises on our hands in our state of maternal mortality, infant mortality, child poverty, affordable child care, and a serious shortage of obstetricians and gynecologists in rural Georgia. We should be addressing those issues that impact the children and families that are already here. We should be expanding access to health care by expanding Medicaid. That, my colleagues, is what we should be discussing today in this Senate body. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to speak against this bill because it targets something important to me and to my constituents. I'm talking about women. I'm talking about reproductive rights, but more importantly, I'm talking about something more basic. This bill, SB 456, is really about access. Access to health care has been a problem for a long time in Georgia. We've talked about this a lot in this chamber. We've talked about it so much that you probably already know that half of our 159 counties in Georgia have no OB physicians. More than 40 counties have no one who does women's reproductive health in their county. And then on the flip side, we've also done nothing to help, to protect and help women's access to health care. We've failed to fully expand Medicaid. We've failed to establish any kind of meaningful parental leave. We've failed to provide a pathway for community midwives. And we've taken no steps to save our rural hospitals. Without access, there can be no equity in health care for women. Let me be clear, the intended outcome of this bill is to limit abortion access in Georgia with the hope that fewer women will be able to access their constitutional rights. Constitutional rights. And what's really cruel about this bill is that those who are already the most vulnerable are the ones who are most likely to be burned by this injustice. People who are poor, people who live in rural communities, people with disabilities, and people of color. The pandemic has made it abundantly clear that telehealth is an important resource for all Georgians. And it's especially important for people with disabilities. Telemedicine is critical for people who may not be able to easily leave their homes to travel to a clinic. Protecting access to abortion via telemedicine is a matter of ensuring that abortion access isn't just for able-bodied people. Telemedicine is able to alleviate the many barriers like cost and distance to clinics, barriers like lack of transportation or childcare. With telemedicine for abortion, maternal mortality rates may improve. And this would be particularly important for Black people in Georgia who are 3 times more likely to die during childbirth than white people. Here's why this matters. When access decreases, the risk of dangerous, self-managed abortion increases. I simply don't believe that we should be supporting legislation in this chamber that purports to know better than doctors and the FDA about what is safe or isn't safe when it comes to women's health. My colleagues, we all know that access matters. In fact, we heard a great deal yesterday about how important it was for people to be able to exercise their legal and constitutionally protected rights without interference or unnecessary delays. And so today, all we are asking is that you leave the law the way it stands and allow access via telehealth to remain available to all those who need it. I yield the well.
The senator from the 26th was correct in terms of why we have this bill in front of us right now, and it has everything to do with the Supreme Court of the United States. When the court agreed to hear Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Care last year, I think all of us knew that Roe v. Wade was coming to an end, was going to be overturned. And we're looking at that coming in June of this upcoming year. And why do we know that? Because according to decades of precedent, the lower courts had always followed the precedent, right? Roe v. Wade, Planned Parenthood, Casey and its progeny. And so this time when the Supreme Court decides to take it up, the only reason they're going to take it up then is because they're going to change it. 50 years. 50 years of precedent. And let's be clear, the state of Mississippi in the Dobbs case has been very blatant in the filings to say the only reason that we want to be before you, Supreme Court, is because we want to reverse Roe v. Wade. Mississippi has been blatant, almost as blatant as the state of Georgia in terms of its filings with respect to the defense of HB 481. And with respect to 481, that's why I'm a little amazed. Y'all know that term gaslighting? Y'all gonna gaslight women up and down. You're gonna come up here and you're gonna tell me that the only reason you wanna pass this law is because you want to protect vulnerable women? You're going to do everything you can to protect women? Highest standard of care that women deserve. And yet you won't even expand Medicaid. Y'all talk about protecting the cherished doctor-patient relationship. And then, you know what you do? You basically take that away. And you tell a doctor what to do. You tell a doctor, you need to tell a woman, and I'm going to say it out loud because it is gross and coercive. The doctor has to inform the patient that she may see the remains of her unborn child in the process of completing an abortion. Let's be clear, this has nothing to do about protecting women. Nothing. It's about an agenda that's being pushed. It is about the fact that the Supreme Court of the United States is about to overturn Roe v. Wade. It is about narrowing whatever access actually may be available, especially to women that are poor, that live in rural areas, and that are women of color. You know, the one thing I do agree with the sponsor with, he said, these women deserve to be treated with respect. How about just women deserve to be treated with respect? I yield the well.
Thank you, Mr. President. And, members of this body, good afternoon. It's been a long day. Now, we're talking about women's rights and what's their constitutional right. And when a woman is making a personal decision about what's right for her health of her family, only that person seeking an abortion can fully understand the complexity in shaping their choice. And that's what we're talking about here, you know, having a choice, having options. And it's important that we offer safe options. We've already said that restricting telemedicine will further or negatively impact mortality rates, especially as we keep reiterating among Black women and low-income families. So eliminating a safe option, limits their choice about what they are choosing for their own health. And I don't think that's for us to decide. And these options are critical. That's why telehealth has been proven so far to be a safe, convenient, viable option. Now, the proponents of this bill have argued that we need this legislation because it's not safe for women to access medication abortion via telehealth. But let me tell you the truth. Extensive research conducted over 19 years by the Mayo Clinic, the CDC, the FDA, and other medical institutions clearly indicate that medication abortion is safe and it's an effective option. Proponents of this bill will tell you that though this method is proven to be safe, far safer in fact than carrying a pregnancy to term, it would not be safe to continue providing it via telehealth. But let me tell you the truth. A UK study comprising of outcomes of over 52,000 abortions before and after medication abortion via telehealth was approved found no increase in complications when telehealth was allowed. In fact, abortions were able to be provided on average earlier and with greater patient satisfaction. And as we're making this decision, we should be looking and taking in the advice from healthcare professionals, the CDC, the rigorous FDA approval that this medicine has gone through. Proponents of SB 456 will tell you that women need to be seen in person because of the risks associated with ectopic pregnancy or risk of infection. But the truth is, serious side effects are vanishingly rare, less common than serious side effects with many drugs that are available via telehealth now, and even over the counter in the US. The death rate is lower than that of penicillin and Viagra. What proponents of this bill won't tell you is that medication abortion is extremely well studied. Risk of complications or serious side effects have been extremely low. Federal regulations around this medication have been long driven more by politics than by science. And recent changes by the FDA to make it more accessible are actually a long overdue reflection of reliable scientific data that proves it's safe. I haven't seen a lot of evidence here presented today that is not safe. Not enough evidence grounded in science and the advice of our healthcare officials. Enacting this legislation will take us backwards in terms of making abortion safe for women in Georgia. More pronounced in our rural communities, where we've said before, we have gaps in costs. There isn't an available clinic close by a lot of times. Sometimes these women can't get off work or have child care available so that they can see about their own care. It just hampers access for the vulnerable people. It undermines public confidence in a procedure that has proven to be safe. It's unfortunate that this is perhaps the actual goal of the bill, to take us backwards, to limit our options, safe options for women making the choice that's best for their own bodies. And maybe it's to make us feel more vulnerable and to make us less safe and to make those women less safe. So I'm asking you to vote no on this bill. Let's support women's right to make the decision for their own bodies and to make them safe and give them safe options. I yield well.
I'm going to open up by saying something that may surprise some people in this chamber. And it is that all other things being equal, I do think that as healthcare providers, we provide more complete care when we get to see and examine our patients in person. Okay, and in talking with many of my colleagues, both inside this chamber and outside of this chamber, most healthcare providers, all other things being equal, prefer to see their patients in person when it's possible. But in that statement is also the root of the problem with this bill, and that is all other things being equal. Because we know that when it comes to health equity, access to care, and maternal morbidity and mortality in Georgia, all things are not equal. We live in a state where access to health insurance coverage and access to health providers is vastly unequal. As we've noted already, half of Georgia's counties don't even have an OBGYN. We live in a state with one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the country, and yes, we acknowledge that this is a problem, and we're doing good work to address this. I know that we're all proud to pass the legislation championed by the senator from the 11th, who's not here, which extended postpartum Medicaid coverage up to a year. But we are aware in looking at this issue and realizing how urgent it is that all things are, in fact, not equal when it comes to accessing reproductive health care here in the state of Georgia. And the pandemic really highlighted for some what was more apparent to many even prior, which is that access to healthcare facilities in particular, getting an appointment, getting time off from work, driving there, maybe not even having access to an in-person visit at all because of COVID precautions, is not always going to be equal or even possible, particularly in a limited time frame as presented in this bill. In the practice of medicine, we made a lot of changes in 2020 because of pandemic circumstances that we've discussed. One of these changes across the fields was increased adaptation of telemedicine, because all other things being equal, most of us want to see our patients in person, but adapting to the circumstances in a way that allowed us to give as much access as possible, while allowing us to continue taking care of as many patients as possible, is in fact the best care we can provide. I noted earlier that Georgia has one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the country, and the important thing to note about this is that this high rate is not tied to abortion care or how it is provided. That figure is tied to pregnancy, delivery, and postpartum care. Knowing this to be the case, patients and their healthcare providers need to have the ability to minimize that risk if it is the case that the woman does not, in fact, want to be pregnant. Like other forms of care delivered by telemedicine, medical abortion via remote care provides a vital, safe alternative for many patients who need care and would have difficulty accessing it otherwise. One question I did want to ask of the bill author before we stop taking questions was that the senator cites 26 deaths as a result of the medications named in the bill. He did not describe what the denominator was. That's a pretty important question. 26 out of what is an important point. I will say that medical abortions have been available since, I believe, about 2020, so that's about 22 years at this point. And when we talk about medication-related deaths, I'm just going to throw this out there, that Tylenol, which is an over-the-counter drug, causes about 460 deaths annually from liver failure. So just so we know what we're talking about, the scale. So this is going to be important because we're all well aware that abortion care in Georgia is most likely going to be severely restricted by this summer after the Supreme Court rules on Mississippi's 15-week abortion ban. This is why this bill matters in this current environment. And because of how narrow this window is about to become, you need to leave healthcare providers as many options as possible in order to allow us to care for the patients who need us. And the legislature should not be in the practice of dictating how we can and should safely practice medicine. I assume the author of the bill supports this notion, as he frequently invokes the sanctity of the doctor-patient relationship and the respect for the decision-making and expertise of physicians. So passing this bill would restrict our ability to give patients the best care we can provide when all other things are not equal. And we cannot talk about, quote, women's health and safety, unquote, without addressing these inequities. Thank you. I yield the well.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. And good afternoon, colleagues. I am going to take my colleague from the 14th at his word and go along with the notion that his primary concern is protecting women's health. This legislation really impacts all Georgians, but it impacts women most acutely. And then there is a subset beyond that who are impacted even more, and that is women of color. Since we are talking about maternal health, let me give you a few statistics. The U.S. has the highest maternal mortality rate among developed countries in the world. Georgia currently has the second highest maternity mortality rate in the U.S. Black women in Georgia are more likely to be dismissed when bringing pregnancy complications to a doctor. Black women in Georgia are more likely to be served by a hospital that offers lower quality care. Black women in Georgia are more likely to have gaps in insurance coverage. And Black women in Georgia are 3 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related complications than white women nationally, according to the data from the CDC. You may be asking yourself, what does this have to do with this bill? We are already trying to address this issue with other legislation, which is true. But you need to understand that historically, when abortion access is limited, maternal mortality rates increase. And because of the dynamics I just explained, as it relates to Black women, if we pass this legislation, it will impact Black women exponentially. It will be undoing the good work we are trying to do in other areas to improve our maternal mortality rates. You cannot do good work on women's health with your right hand while simultaneously undermining it with your left. That is not progress. If you truly care about women's health, then you care about Black women's health as well. And you should be taking a closer look at the impact of this bill. When you limit access to care in a state where we already have so many barriers, you are not changing anyone's mind about continuing a pregnancy. You are pushing women to have abortions later in their term. You are pushing them to resort to unsafe solutions. You are telling them that their health, in fact, does not matter to you, no matter what you claim your intentions are. I am so tired of coming to this chamber and being told with a straight face that my colleagues from the Republican Party are doing something to help women when in fact we are doing the opposite. If we wanted to do something to protect women's health, we would be listening to the recommendations of the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, the nation's premier professional organization for women's health professionals. They spoke in opposition to this bill when it was in committee. We would be listening to the individual doctors who testified against it. And we would be listening to the women who are directly impacted, many of whom will stand up to speak today. I know that overriding knowledgeable experts, impacted people, and the will of the majority of Georgians has become a regular practice in this chamber. We just did it with the last bill. But I still feel compelled to point it out when I see it. I will continue to stand up for those who elected me to represent their interests, their rights, and their bodies. I may not be able to protect them, but at least by speaking up, I can protect the truth. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Colleagues, as a member of the Senate Health and Human Services Committee, I present the minority report on behalf of all of the members of my party that were at that committee meeting and voted against this legislation. The Federal Drug Administration issued a finding that allows telemedicine, telehealth to provide women with access to a drug to use for an abortion. Now, this body is racing to usurp that federal authority. And they're doing it under the guise of a banner that says Women's Health and Safety Act. Balderdash. Remember that term? What we're seeing here is the continuation of a 50-year effort to undo the Supreme Court finding that women's right to privacy includes the right to reproductive decisions about their reproductive health. And this legislation that's before us, under that guise, under that false banner, is going to result in, actually, in its purest form, the results of this legislation, were it to be enacted into law, will mean that women who've been impregnated by a rapist or an incestuous assault on their body, some percentage of those women will be bearing an unwanted child fathered by a rapist or a family member. That is inevitable. That is the on-the-ground reality for what will happen were this bill to become law. And yet it's called the Women's Health and Safety Act. You've heard the recitation, both of the medical studies that have shown that medication abortion with telehealth is safe. You've heard that from a learned doctor. You've heard a learned attorney trace this trajectory over 50 years and where we're headed, the train wreck that is in front of us, the continual drumbeat of the GOP trying to paint abortion care as unsafe for women. You've heard the statistic that birth and abortion are both safe, but it's 14 times safer to have an abortion than to give birth. And medication abortion is not a high-risk procedure. And we all know the history is long and storied when you limit abortion access. When you spread disinformation, you're going down the road of increased maternal mortality rates. The very rate that we are seeking to reduce because it is scandalously high in Georgia. You've heard the documentation. This state has not expanded Medicaid. One of a dwindling number of 50 states that has not expanded Medicaid. We're not providing the health care coverage, the insurance for people to access basic medical services. And everyone in here lives with the reality, keenly understands that rural Georgia has a set of challenges that are enormous when it comes to accessing health care of any kind. I don't live in rural Georgia. I'm right here in downtown Atlanta. My constituents have hospitals. They can throw a rock almost and hit a hospital. But people have to drive hours in some parts of the state, and you all are here in the sound of my voice, and you represent those people, and you live in those counties, and you know the hospitals that have, you can tick off the rural hospitals that have closed. All of this making it more difficult for women to access all kinds of health services, for Georgians to access all kinds of health service. That's where we should be placing our attention. That's what we should be doing with our energy if we step into this well and claim to be for women's health and safety, and we've got a great act right here that you can pass and it'll give women health and safety. Untrue. It's in those rural areas that elect you to come up here that women will be pushed into through these barriers that you're creating a barrier to healthcare access through telemedicine. telemedicine that works, telemedicine that's in widespread use in the wake of this pandemic. And you're passing a bill that creates a barrier to accessing health services by telemedicine. What will happen is that there will be dire consequences that we've seen across history when a woman or a young woman is faced with a painful decision and is denied the access to the health services that are safe and that are effective and that are FDA approved because they don't have the means to get up to one of these great hospitals we have in the urban areas of our state. So that's the impact of this bill. Let's just take the mask off, if you will, and let's unmask this bill and tell the truth about the consequences. Now we know that, and it's interesting, because we're up here as people in politics who stand for election, go home and talk to our constituents, listen to them, or maybe we don't. But we're going to go home, and the women and families in your districts are going to know what you did here. I'm going to help make sure they know, frankly. A lot of us are. We're going to be full-throated about this effort to deny women access to modern medicine to address their reproductive health choices. And something that I hope everybody's learned by now, or maybe they'll learn it in November. You know, women understand, women remember, and women show up and vote. Women vote in higher numbers than men, higher percentage of women vote than do men. And we've been seeing women across Georgia changing their voting patterns as they see what's happening here under the Gold Dome. And that, I will tell you, friends, is what we will see in the outcome of these upcoming elections this year. While some of you may feel that you are insulating yourselves and protecting yourselves in your districts by passing this barrier to abortion services, you are, in fact, on thin ice, dangerous ground, because women are watching. Women are listening. Women are understanding what you're doing. And women will show up and vote based on that. I yield the well.